If today was not Shabbat, we would very soon be blowing the shofar, but we have to wait till tomorrow. Um, Nevertheless, there are two aspects of the shofar that I wanted to bring to the fore today. So the first is that the shofar is said to be a secret language between Israel and God. No matter how far we stray or how distant God seems from us, the shofar is the language that reconnects us. The metaphor is often used of a parent and a child traveling through a forest. And the child is allowed to go exploring and does so. And if they get so far apart that they can no longer see each other, the parent says, blow this whistle, and I will hear it and follow the sound and come find you. Right? That's the image of the shofar. The second thing I want to raise about the shofar is that it is undifferentiated sound. The shofar, we speak of the kol shofar, the voice of the shofar. No words, just sound. And like other supraverbal forms of communication, a deep sigh, a good cry, music, a hug, or verbally really good poetry. It can simultaneously convey and contain a thing and its opposite, right? Joy and pain, fear and hope, ambivalence and ambiguity and contradiction of all sorts. So in both of these ways, the secret language and the undifferentiated sound, a shofar is about connection. Across the gap between us and God, when we're too far apart, or in non-theological language, between us and whatever parts of ourselves we've lost and seek. And between hard to reconcile ideas, feelings, values, demands. And that brings us to our theme this year. As I explained last night, I'm centering my teaching around the image of our new name, the bridge. And especially three primary functions of bridging: bridge as connector, bridge as transitioner, taking us from here to there, and bridge as supporter, enabling us to traverse difficult terrain. And these three functions speak, I don't have to tell you, particularly poignantly and powerfully to the challenges of our time, right? It's a time of extreme polarization and loneliness. And we yearn for connection, for commonality, for reassurance of shared values. It's a time of profound transitions. I think a lot of us sense we're kind of witnessing what historians will one day look back on as the end of an era and the beginning of something else. And obviously, it's a time when we need a lot of support, the bridge over troubled waters. But the reality is, these issues are endemic to the human condition, which is perhaps why they're so resonant with the themes of the high holidays. So a very brief recap of last night, and then I'll move forward. Aside from Paul Simon's song, the next most famous Jewish text relating to bridges, the Gesher, which many of us know, is a teaching by Rav Nachman of Bratslav. We mostly know it as Kol Haolam Kulo Gesher Tsar Meod, right? The whole world is a very narrow bridge. What he actually said was close, but not quite. What he actually said was the da, no. It's important to know this. Shehadam tzarich lavor al gesher tsar meod meod, that a person needs to cross a very, very narrow bridge. V'haklal v'ha'ikar. The main principle, the essence, is not to give in to fear at all. And I mentioned that I believe this is a reworking of an earlier teaching by the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism and Nachman's great-grandfather. And the Baal Shem taught that after death, the soul has to cross a very narrow bridge, transitioning from this world to the next. And Nachman took it and he said, crossing the narrow bridge isn't only what happens after death, it's about life. Life itself is a gesher tsar me'od. Now, I don't think he means to say that life is a terrible, dangerous journey, and there are threats everywhere. One misstep, and you plunge into the abyss, right? I don't think that's his point. I think his primary meaning is that a life well lived requires connecting and balancing contradictions, tensions that can only be managed, never fully resolved. My obligations to myself, my obligations to others. Jewish particularism, who we are as Jews. Jewish universalism, our obligations and consciousness of all humanity, to all humanity. Tradition, evolution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he's saying it's a very fine line to walk, but it's the essence of life. So I know I teach about this all the time, right? This is the core of my Torah. It's why I love the name Bridge Shul, right? We can think of it in the philosophical formulation wrongly often attributed to Hegel: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. The thing, its opposite, the bridge, which leads to a new thing, a new opposite, a new bridge. And Nachman's saying that is the essence of life, a delicate dance of competing values and truths and needs. It's a narrow bridge, and to cross it successfully, we have to be very careful not to fall into the fallacy of choosing one side or the other, or losing the connection between the two. And this, in a nutshell, is why I'm a conservative Jew. Because that's the essence of what we purport to do, is to hold both. Now, not from a philosophical perspective, but regarding truth from physicist Niels Bohr, one of my favorite quotes, he says, the opposite of a fact is a falsehood, but the opposite of one profound truth may very well be another profound truth. And it turns out that Nachman himself connected his Gesher Tsar Ma'od teaching to truth. In Hebrew, emet. And he says truth is in the aspect of the bridge. Why? Here's my theory. One, because of Niels Bohr, right? Because truth can only be found in the bridging of seeming contradictions. It doesn't mean that truth is totally relative. No, it means both and thinking yields truth. And the second reason is because emet, truth, is in a certain sense the realization of an underlying connectedness of all things, right? If we could have sort of a version of X-ray goggles or the 3D glasses that you get, or like a reality, whatever those like virtual reality headsets are, right? We would be able, we look at the world and we see all these disparate, distant, different things. If we had the right way of seeing, we would see all of the connective tissue. We would see that in fact, we're actually all one large ecosystem. And I think actually it's one way of thinking of God, who our tradition said the seal of God is truth, emet, as the connective tissue within all there is, right? Bridging everything. Now, this notion applies to ultimate truths, profound truths, as Niels Bohr said. It also applies to the truth about oneself. An honest look in the mirror is always both and. I am the basically good person I want to believe I am. And I also am capable of doing wrong. I have what to repent for. They're both true. I have to difficulty that some people have owning, for example, the legacy of slavery, or owning the moral complexities in Israel. Acknowledging that we do wrong doesn't negate what we do right. They're both true. It's okay. And the task is to learn to hold both, right? We don't have to say America's a terrible country because, we're all horrible, because yes, we have this terrible thing in our past. It's true. And also, there are other truths. And that's the only way to confront them. Here's another way in which a look in the mirror involves both and thinking. I'm a unique, independent being, my own self. And I can only really discover the truth about myself in connection and in relationship to others. I'm part of a system. So we don't today have the raw sound of the shofar that holds that both and so well. The secret language that connects what we've lost tomorrow. Today, we have to do that bridging function ourselves. I'll speak more later on the personal piece of it. For now, we're about to turn to our prayers for America and Israel, and I invite us as we do so to be especially mindful of the need for reconnection and bridging polarities in both countries. I'm not going to, on these high holy days, give a sermon specifically dedicated to Israel or to America, although both countries are off sorts. I think we know that. I hope you'll hear and derive for yourself underneath all of my teachings an undercurrent of how what I'm teaching applies in both places. And obviously, both countries need our prayers and even more, our committed action. Regarding Israel, now is not the time to disconnect. Israel needs us. Now is the time to reconnect and do it more deeply, with more nuance, and do the hard work of bridging. And here, I'm very happy to announce that Gesher has joined a wonderful organization called the Partnership for Democracy. It's a trans-partisan clearinghouse for Jewish organizations to come together to work to bolster American democracy. Their goals are short-term, to protect electoral democracy, confronting immediate threats, and in the long term, and this is where the connections are even more important, to rebuild a strong, resilient, democratic culture, a culture of civic responsibility, understanding that being a good citizen is more than one day election day. It's an ongoing culture that we have to fight for. They want to fight polarization and support civic learning and development. And as they say, their goal is for democracy to win, not any particular candidate in any election. So they're going to be connecting synagogues and other groups, national groups like Hillel, with opportunities to engage in pro-democracy work And we'll be passing those opportunities on to you, like signing up to be a poll worker and educational resources. One thing we're exploring is our community co-hosting an online learning series with a couple of other small congregations like us in geographically diverse areas. So maybe once a month, we'll gather online to learn about civics and civics in a Jewish context, with maybe a small synagogue in the South and a small synagogue in the Midwest. And then we'll be able to have conversation with each other afterwards, right? It's pretty cool. So stay tuned for that. I just wanted to announce it today.